Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, 2021 started and this is another Monday, and here we are again. Is there any difference since the last Monday? Not much. We can only hope that this can be better. After all, everything goes on.
It has always been the same with humankind. One day, we will wake up and everything will be completely different for good or bad. There was such an expectation for the year 2000.
YK2 problem. All computers survived.
Then, 2012. End of the world date in Mayan calendar. There were so many different expectations in people, and the world continued. But in the divine order and the universe, we read that the end gradually gets closer and closer. That third part the book is so different than the first and second parts of it, isn't it?
Yes, the first and the second parts are about sharing knowledge on the mechanism of the universe and also, putting forward many unexpected questions, and also, while this book's manuscript has been kept in the safes of the notaries, there had been many scientific developments, and when the book is disclosed and printed, we read these spiritual communiqués and saw that many points were in sync with those developments. And in this way, the book verifies its content. It is a tightly packed knowledge source, and when you read it, you can say that this book was really beyond the times it was compiled. And then, in the third part, it gives a detailed account of what had happened in the previous world cycle and then adds very detailed information about things to come about the end of this world cycle and concludes by saying this is a gift to mankind. So, we study it diligently and try to understand it better.
Last week, we made a Q&A video. We tried our best to answer the questions our friends asked. It may be that we missed a few, but please keep on writing and sending your questions to us. We plan to make more Q&A videos in future. I'd like to say that, in this series we read and comment on the book, so if you can send us relevant questions about the pages we read so far, it is better for all of us to focus on the related topics. It is a sign that our friends already read the book, but this is not a book for reading one time. Because each time you read it, you can notice a new thing as you change, as your comprehension widens. It may be beneficial to read this book by underlining sentences, by taking notes. And this reminds me as saying, what you write with your hand will be with you till the end. Neurobiologists discovered that in the learning systems of the brain, when we listen to or watch a lecture, we may feel that we understand the information given, but if we write down what we hear, this information is recorded more successfully. Yes, let's start reading from where we stopped on our 12th video. This initial stage advances from spirit's first involvement with the universe until it reaches the first hydrogen atom of matter. This spirit has not yet been in possession of a body in the universe, because there are not yet any powers in it to gather universe matter. Because of this, it will only be subjected to a passive and mechanical progress in the simple matter states in accordance with the necessities of the sublime principles, which appreciate its first needs in the face of the universe, filtrating from the unitary. During that time, it will not have a material identity manifesting as comprehension, will, consciousness and freedom in universe. Gaining such an identity will only be possible gradually, in conformity with the order of sublime principles, in proportion to its needs, which after cycles as long as infinity it will go through, always as passive and mechanical amidst amorphous matter. Because of this, for spirits at these initial matter stages, there are no active states entailing will, freedom and comprehension. They have not yet been connected to some matter constitutions in the universe. These novice spirits, while at this stage, for their simple reflections to be developed through mechanical ways, they are made to encounter myriad states and motions of matter by being plunged in and out. These words are not true but symbolic because spirits can never be plunged into matter, of one matter state to another, and if necessary, into another matter state. In matter at this initial stage, there are none of the motions and forms seen in our universe. And these are in formless, amorphous, disarrayed states, relative to our realm, which their general ensemble brings out of an amorphous milieu. Following this developmental stage of initial universe matter, a higher state which we call the hydrogen state, the one our cosmos is subject to, will occur. Now, we give knowledge relating to this stage. Yes, the book will explain next the hydrogen system. Previously, it had explained the amorphous matter, and after the initial influence from the original principle arrived at the amorphous matter, it had mentioned a dark stage and later, matter's stages of development. And you had mentioned that this is one of the properties of this book. It revisits the topic previously mentioned and consolidated these with added knowledge, and in this way, it advances these previous topics.
Here, first thing got my attention is one of the topics I constantly mention. There are not yet any powers in spirit to gather universe matter. So, at this stage, spirits need to acquire powers. Of course, in the universe, for spirits, learning something means to be able to reach the stage of utilizing that thing and eventually, of becoming that thing. Thighs is what the unitary at the uppermost point is. The stage of becoming the universe. Learning and utilizing the universe completely. And when we take this concept to the lower, the spirit is not yet in the stage of gathering and utilizing matter in order to bring about a field of application or a body. And please, when I say body, do not think a human body. Because the spirit has no capacity even for a plant body. And what it does in that stage? It receives impressions by passively passing from one matter to another by the two-sided reflection of the influence of the original principle, from matter to spirit, from spirit to matter. And, although the book still talks about amorphous matter, this is not the initial state of the amorphous matter because it received the initial influence and this initiated a slight motion in it. Even with that slight motion, matter begins to get developed quickly, but the spirits need to adapt to matter, so they passively pass from matter to matter, or more correctly, from sub-particles to particles that are suitable for them, but without connecting to any of these. And the book says, passive and mechanical, to describe this stage, but it does not say, automatic, because automatism is a relatively higher stage and is valid only for a working system after the mechanic stage is established. So, at this stage, matter or particles are just above the amorphous state, and as matter increase their motions or vibrations under the light of the original principle, they respond to the spirit's needs at this stage. There is not even proto-hydrogen atom yet. Matter is in a stage of slight stirrings. And there is another phrase about the spirits in this stage. For spirits at these initial matter stages, there are no active states entailing will, freedom and comprehension. And this is so normal, because spirits are almost infinitely away from the next stage. They cannot be active yet because they are in a passive and mechanical phase. In other words, spirits have no command on matter yet because they don't have the ability of gathering these particles and make an organization out of them. This is not expected from them, this is not a failure. This is just what they can do in this stage. And these three words, will, freedom and comprehension. As we read the pages on the following stages up to the human stage, you will see that these three words will mean something different for each stage to come. And finally, these become true freedom, true or highest comprehension and highest level of will at the plan of duty. But the rule is the same in each stage, first learning a stage and then becoming that stage and utilizing that stage to learn the next stage up. This rule prevails in the incarnations. So, now, the spirit is in the learning phase, although it is passively and mechanically learning.
Before this passage we read, there was a sentence at the end of the previous paragraph. Spirit continues to progress as always passive, that is, without intervening with matter motions in the simpler matter within the lower matter stages in which it exists with its slow progression. So, still this concept of novice spirits continues here, as well. We had repeated many times, but for the people who just started to watch our video, let me say this again. Spirit is novice in regard the matter substance of our universe, because we previously read in the book that there are other universes with different matter substances. So, the spirits are novice to the matter substance of our universe and they need to evolve by becoming able to utilize the matter substance of our universe. And also we read that we cannot know about their evolutionary needs. We will discuss such topics in detail as we read on. So, here, We also see that these stages continue for such a long time that it is almost infinite for us. The book will later add that this stage is arduous. So, besides of its almost infinite duration, this passive and mechanical stage is not easy to finish. Of course, we, as human beings, are now at the advanced stages of the human stage, and what we read and discuss here is about the initial stages of this almost infinite journey we traversed until we reached here and now. So, we cannot understand the almost infinite expanse of this journey, and that's why the book advises us that you can't understand it cognitively, you can only understand this by intuition. So, once again, let me tell you that it is better to try understanding what we read in this book by our feelings, by our intuition. Yes, that's all I can say for now. Here, the book establishes what it previously said about this stage, more firmly.
For here, the important thing is to notice that, in this passage, the book talks about the stage just after the amorphous state of matter, the stage of slight stirrings in matter. And the passive and mechanic stage when spirits can only get impressions, the novice state of the spirits. And what was there before this? Neither spirits, nor the motion in matter. That was the first stage. Soon, the book will start explaining the initial hydrogen atom stage, then the hydrogen realm, but before this, there is another stage. I want to list these stages back to back because we can mix their sequence sometimes. I guess, in this way, we will understand them better. Yes, that's all I can say for now.
All right, then I continue to read. Primary matter, which is the beginning of our cosmos, is composed of matter of the primal, disarrayed milieu which makes up the initial universe stage. We have seen that matter constitutions come into existence in our cosmos through the duality principle and value differentiation mechanism. As a consequence of this reality, the occurrence of initial states and forms of the original substance in our cosmos must be studied together with these mechanisms. Knowledge to be given about the stirrings of the initial atom of the hydrogen cosmos with the world's language and words will rather be symbolic and depend on intuitions. 4. Mankind actually has no knowledge at all about the forms and qualities of the initial motions in the cosmos. We have said that as human comprehension stops in the realities belonging above our cosmos after a certain point, neither can it probe beyond a certain point below it. However, the bases of the laws and principles that are valid in our matter universe are one. Here, what changes are not these bases but forms and manifestations of these laws and principles, occurring according to cosmoses. This situation helps mankind to attain some comparative intuitions that they need about various realities belonging to the lower and higher parts of our cosmos, so these intuitions are enough to complement the knowledge about the universe for mankind. Now we may start to explain how the initial hydrogen atom is constituted. Yes, what do you want to say about this part?
Now, the book talks about primary matter, but please don't be confused, this is not another matter, just a term for the matter in this initial state, the matter in which the initial motion has begun with the influences coming from the original principle. We can consider this term for matter which is the building block of the matter universe. In this sense, it is primary. The first. So please don't be confused. Another thing we need to know here is, matter constitutions come into existence in our cosmos through the duality principle and value differentiation mechanism. And the duality principle and the value differentiation mechanism is particular to our universe, to our matter. The original principle, with the initial influences sent to amorphous matter, makes these established in matter and renders the matter constitutions or organizations work only within this setup. And later we will read that this setup or way of working is basic but its scope or formulation is vast. And for each realm, these has separate applications. For example, we more or less understand the duality principle's influence in matter because we live and engage with the matter of our world, our matter universe. However, we cannot understand its position in the plan of duty, there is a mention about this in the book, but we can't understand this, even the book says so. Therefore, this duality principle works for each realm in accordance with the vibration of that universe, with the aim of knowledge for the spirits in that universe. And spirits has to progress with this principle. That is, it is not like this principle exists here but not there. Only at the unitary, it doesn't. Because at the unitary, everything becomes one. Let's accept this like this.
The unitary, the unity. It is a unity of the all comprehensions, after all. As to the duality principle, the book states every matter unit as a duality unit which contains both opposites, and motion occurs as values from one opposite to other changes. And even, the book states the spirit and matter are opposites that initiates motion, saying that matter is passive and the spirit is active. We had discussed this topic in our previous videos. Yes, we also read that there are universes in infinite numbers and each of these universes has its own substance. And there is no connections between these universes. Even the plan giving these spiritual communiqués state that we cannot know about those universes. And again, you had explained clearly that those many universes are not the same with theory of parallel universes. So, once again, I suggest our friends to watch our previous videos. We see in this passage about this stage, by the influences of the original principle filtered through the unitary, the value differentiation initiates motion in matter and matter begins to respond to this. Matter begins to get developed. We already discussed the states that matter displays as it responds to the incoming influences by their motions varying in innumerable degrees of simplicity and complexity, roughness and fineness. In this passage what strikes me as most important is this: realms or duality units, that is, forms and manifestations of these cosmoses or realms can change, but the bases of the laws and principles that are valid in our matter universe are one. As in this saying, as above, so below. It is apparent that even eons before we beings come about, at this initial stage of matter's becoming, these laws and principles were at work and still at work, but their manifestations and form are different in different cosmoses.
And another thing to keep in our minds, dear friends. The book states the duration of this stage of development as almost infinite. Still, we may assume that this stage has a certain time period. No, we must imagine it as a gradual process from stage to next stage, almost never ending. I mean, the longest time period you may imagine may be just a second compared to this gradual process. Because we will read the same description for the next stage, while a spirit is becoming connected to a hydrogen atom and receive impressions, as well. So, it is obvious that spirit comes from an eternity and enters into eternity, yet it has no concern about time, it has no haste. Of course, such concerns and haste are only ours, us humans, and they are not valid there. So, things are getting developed over an incredibly long time. So, let's keep in our minds.
Alright, let's continue reading. We have previously said that the initial matter of our cosmos is the hydrogen atom, and this is completely different from the hydrogen atom known by mankind and is but a very primitive version of it. Again, we have also mentioned that, because it is the initial matter of our realm, this atom, which is so simple and primal that mankind cannot recognize it, is a matter closest to the amorphous state. As mentioned before, in the universe, this initial stage, ruled by the mechanical evolution principle, is only composed of an infinite, dark, disarrayed and amorphous milieu which is the substage of hydrogen atom. Evolution here has been connected to a completely mechanical system. At this stage, matter is not gathered but disarrayed. Because the spirits, which at this stage are only rendering mechanical applications, have not yet attained the power to gather matter. Because of this, these simple spirits follow a primal path of evolution which is endlessly mechanical and impossible for mankind to understand, drifting by jumping from this matter to that matter, without connecting any matter, due to the sublime necessities of original sources, amidst the disarrayed, formless matter of this primal milieu. And here, as they are evolving passively, after a long cycle that seems like eternity, some of these spirits slowly become advanced enough in their evolution to gather this disarrayed matter. As a ground for the following evolution of a spirit that has reached such a state, an influence comes from the unitary upon a point within this amorphous milieu. This influence, despite displaying characters opposing each other, as one belonging to a spirit that is connected to that matter, that is, belonging to a spirit that attained the state of becoming able to grasp that matter, and another belonging to the constitution of that matter which is in the process of constitution, is composed of two influences supporting, complementing each other, in short, directed to the same target. And of course, both of these are again, a manifestation of the original influence which appears two-fronted in the universe. These two opposite influences constitute a matter unity, that is, a duality unit. These components are part of the amorphous matter existing in that milieu, immobilized into a congregated state under the incoming influences, because the magnetic field caused by these motions collect this disarrayed matter together. And these motions are the initial motions of the hydrogen cosmos that are arranged by the original influences in accordance with the necessities of connecting a spirit to that atom. Fields that are composed of such initial atoms bring out the initial states of myriad nebulous fields that make up all the bodies, spheres and systems of the astronomical cosmos. So, a spirit has been connected to the initial atom which originated in this way. In other words, the need of this spirit to connect to this atom has caused the occurrence of this atom due to necessities of the original principle. And the original influence, descending into an amorphous milieu by carrying the necessities of this need of spirit, has provided its connection with this atom. So, hydrogen atoms that are composed of two components, opposing each other but in a state of equilibrium, make up the primary matter in the simple states of our cosmos. Yes, the first paragraph we read is a summary of what previously stated. Now, we read that primary matter is the beginning of our cosmos and our cosmos is just this primal, disarrayed milieu. And spirits are floating or skipping from matter to matter in this disarrayed milieu. Still, please remember that all the descriptions we make here are symbolic. Spirit is not inside matter and it does not directly connect to matter, its connection to matter is only via influences. And when the book describes the spirits in this stage as simple, they are simple in regard to their relation to matter. After all, we already read that the spirits are super-universe truths and because of this we cannot know their level of evolution or their relations to other universes. Anything you want to add?
Not to this part but for the following ones, I'd like to say that, this stage is just after the amorphous stage. And it is the stage of emergence of the primal or proto-hydrogen atom, more correctly, this is the substage of the photohydrogen atom. What kind of a stage this is? This is not discovered by the science yet. For us, this is impossible for us to detect. Still, from what I read here I grasp some clues. Fields that are composed of such initial atoms bring out the initial states of myriad nebulous fields that make up all the bodies, spheres and systems of the astronomical cosmos. And such fields may be the proto or simple states of innumerable galaxy fields. This is a great clue. We had shared a video clip in our second or third video in this series, about the Higgs boson. And it was stated there that these bosons, and eventually the field of Higgs boson has a property that may allow the orientation and combinations of all quarks and the all particles that could be discovered so far in the particle physics. And through this Higgs field, all those particles become organized and begin to make up the particles that emerge as proton and neutron, which they make up the nuclei of an atom, that is, matter. So, the existence of this Higgs field is proved by the experiments. Of course, researchers named Higgs boson as God particle because of another reason, but here, as we read these pages, it sounds so apt. Why? Because it has a property suitable for the duality principle that allows such organizations. So, simple atoms the book talks about in these pages are these, the cores or nuclei of all the atoms making up all those galaxies, these are the bosons, quarks and leptons etc. All of these are freely roaming in this stage. The very basic or simple forms of these. But please don't assume that simple atom has slower electrons etc. There is no such thing, there is no such equation. After all, electron itself is a simple atom in this stage and the system that will make combinations of these simple particles is becoming built in this stage. Later, these combinations will become an atom known by the chemistry and physics. And the spirits are in a phase of receiving impressions among these and by connecting matter it begins to get experienced or informed about matter. And how matter moves up from the initial amorphous state to this disarrayed milieu and to these simple organized states. Of course, by the influences of the original principle. In this stage, these influences begin to display a two-sided property, one side is involved with spirit and the other side is involved with matter, hence, to allow their indirect interaction. By allowing this indirect interaction between spirit which is active and matter which is passive, polarities in an equilibrium occur in these particles. And this is a very important point. I kindly urge you to watch the videos of the first 3 or 4 weeks. Because, first hydrogen atoms are made up of such dual components, opposite each other but in an equilibrium. They make up the primary matter of our cosmos, in their simplest states, and all of these have polarities. They have spin directions, negative and positive. And their polarities work as the duality. And the further organizations among the particles are done by utilizing this polarity. And after this point, we don't call these particles, we call these fields because they begin to cover the whole universe. The book says cosmos, but again, we would think the whole space we could observe with our gadgets and telescopes is the whole thing, however, this is only one of the cosmoses. Well, this paragraph we just read will become more important as we read on. Because it talks about the stage the interaction between the spirits and matter increase, and also, the stage matter begins to display its own character as a component.
And here, we understand how the opposite natures of spirit and matter gets resolved within a matter when a spirit connect to it, it becomes a duality unit, in other words, a unit that has two polarities in an equilibrium. I see in the chat box that our friends write that everything is energy, everything is frequency. Yet, what we read here is completely different than the frequencies we now detect or use, let's say like radio waves, like in our GPS satellites etc. This stage is about way before the manifest universe, this hydrogen cosmos and its frequencies we are now in emerged. I kindly remind our new friends who joined this recording to read the previous pages of the book or to watch our previous videos. Another question caught my eye, as the initial stages occur, did the unitary already exist? Well, we read this. Spirit will only be subjected to a passive and mechanical progress in the simple matter states in accordance with the necessities of the sublime principles, which appreciate its first needs in the face of the universe, filtrating from the unitary. So, it is obvious that unitary is there, even at the initial stage.
Because of this question, I think it will be beneficial to repeat this. So far what we read in this book, these stages are not the stages of creation. Matter universe exists and the unitary exists. And this existing matter universe are in a cycle, it starts from the amorphous matter in accordance with the needs of the spirits and gets developed until it reaches its uppermost boundary. And when the spirits' needs are met, they withdraw and the universe reverts to its amorphous state. Again, these stages are not about how the matter universe is created. And neither about the Big Bang. What we have read and discussed so far are about the infinitely long stages before it, and what we will read and discuss in the following videos will be about the infinitely long stages after our current time. Let me repeat again, we don't talk about the creation of the matter universe. There is no word or sentence about such a creation in this book. We only talk about the cycle. And from which point the book begins to explain. The most logical point, its zero state. And now, as we read, we see that the book gradually explains how the matter gets developed in accordance with the needs of the spirits and how the spirits evolve. At that zero point or amorphous state of the matter universe, the original principle already exists, spirits already exist, the matter universe already exists, other universes already exists. So, please establish this in our minds clearly, we do not talk about the beginning or the creation.
Yes, we already talked about these topics in the first few videos of our series. So, it will be beneficial for our friends to watch these. We are now in the 14th video and we progress by summarizing the previous topics because we got feedback from you for discussing these stages in more detail. Alright, we read here how the initial states of myriad nebulous fields that make up all the bodies, spheres and systems of our cosmos, so we understand from this that the book talks about their initial states, not their known states.
And, the book mentions a period of time that continues like an eternity. So please notice that these stages are so long that assigning them a measure of time becomes impossible.
Of course, for us a period of time means a measurable time, but because we try to understand those periods mentioned in the book by our worldly time or superficial time, they are out of our scope of perception or comprehension. That is, when it is said almost infinite or an eternity, it does not make a sense for us. Yet maybe, we can try to understand by experiencing or remembering the subjective time perception when we are engaged with things we like. Hours pass by but it feels like a few minutes. Or in our dreams or meditations, it may feel like a lifetime but then we notice that it lasted only a few seconds. Even in our matter universe's time there are different structures that make us feel the passage of time differently. We must never forget that no matter how many spiritual experiences we have, our time perception is still bound by our brain and the sensual filters of our bodies. Yes, I continue reading. A spirit that is connected to the initial atom, that is, to the hydrogen atom of our cosmos, will not leave it until a moment when an advanced stage of that atom will occur, which we call being. Here, again, there is a mechanical automatic evolutionary progress. That is, spirits in that first stage of the evolution of hydrogen will continue in their evolution by passively following all successive developmental stages of the primal hydrogen atom which they grasped at first. During that time, they are not prevailing upon the hydrogen atom. For, there exists neither intuition, comprehension nor freedom in them that determines such a prevalence. These are not in a situation to bring out a being from various matters by gathering them. Therefore, their evolution processes are more or less passive and mechanical as the ones in the initial stage. There is one difference in between that while in the stage of amorphous milieu, beings could not hang on a matter at all. For, there they were not actually in a state in which they were able to grasp any matter. They were only rendering their mechanical applications by jumping from matter to matter, under the necessities of original influences amidst disarrayed matter. In the initial stage of the hydrogen cosmos, beings are connected to the hydrogen atoms they grasped. They cannot jump to another atom than the one they are connected to. And throughout the whole development of that atom, they follow its developmental stages except that meanwhile they are not prevailing on that atom. They only participate passively in its motions and grow accustomed to adapt to these motions. 4. These motions are constituted under the sublime necessities of original influences and take on their directions. There, spirits will complete the application cycle which will take a very long time until the stage of being, under these necessities and by becoming captured, that is, by becoming passively led, obeying these motions. Starting from the constitution of this initial hydrogen atom until the occurrence of the initial state of being, the influence which prevails upon the structure of the atom is the prime influence, that is, the influence coming from the original principle and of this, as we have said, a side exists which belongs to the spirit that has connected to that atom. So, in this original influence descending into this atom, there are sides, one material side, belonging to the structure of the atom, and also a spiritual side, incoming as belonging to spirit. Thus, influences belonging to spirits and incoming indirectly, through the channel of original influences, will only render their mechanical applications by adapting to the determined motions of the atom. As they progress towards the stage of being by this application, they automatically do preparations of initial instincts belonging to the states of relations between matter in the face of the causality principle. Evolution in this cycle is very long and arduous for spirits. Of course, concepts of arduousness and length here are relative. Actually, there is no such thing either as length, shortness, arduousness, or easiness in the divine order.
Now, the book reached the stage very near to the subhydrogen atom. And gradually, it begins to refer to the hydrogen atom and the being. Now, let's try to understand this. When we look at these particles from the perspective of our knowledge in physics, what do we see? These simple particles, through combinations they make with each other, become initial photons and neutrons and electrons, and with the varying degrees of more combinations the first hydrogen atom, the hydrogen atom we know in physics, emerges. Now, I will talk about the being because the book refers to it in that passage. Before the hydrogen atom emerges, the spirit connects to an atom we can term as simple. Remember that, spirit's progress previously was passive and mechanical. Now, when it connects to an atom, this progress becomes passive, mechanic and automatic. And the spirit begins learning the properties of matter, of things. Spirit begins learning the properties of the atom, how the atom gets gathered, how the atom gets dispersed. What is different in this stage for the spirit? It now remains connected to that atom and begins to evolve as this atom gets developed. In this stage, spirit has no command on this atom because spirit does not have the knowledge yet for gathering or combining for this atom's emergence. However, as the spirit progresses, its experience increases. At this point, let me talk briefly about for the friends who don't know how atoms occur according to physics. It is so normal, if it is not your field of interest, you may not know. Almost all of atoms occur in the stars. Our sun is also a star. Inside our sun, there are two simple atoms occur. We humans feel like the universe turn around us, but actually, ours is a very simple solar system. So, hydrogen and helium occur in our sun. Of course, other atoms also occur through high pressures and extreme heat and big bangs. Yes, plural bangs. Actually, in the astronomical cosmos, in different times and places these big bangs happens, and due to extreme degrees of pressure and heat resulted in these explosions, the upper levels of the elements emerge. Back to the spirit and its atom. As spirit gets impressions from this hydrogen atom, this atom gets developed and becomes helium atom. This progress advances just as our periodic table advance, up to the recently added atoms to the periodic table. At these upper levels atoms begins to acquire some properties, they become developed atoms or developed matter. We had shared an image of the uranium atom in our first videos. If I am not mistaken, uranium atom has 196 electrons. All those electrons is in such array that their organization and motions continue without colliding with each other. It is so hard to keep that many electrons organized in this array, and this cannot be done by chance. Yes, these develop atoms, especially if they are unstable, begin to emit energies. The book says energies, and we humans call these emissions or radiations, beta radiations, gamma radiations, etc. These radiations from these developed atoms makes up a ball of high energy, and the building blocks or primary matter of the realm we call the semi-subtle realm are these energies, and these energies make up even higher energies, and the spirit manages to gather and build a being out of these higher energies. Well, of course, this passage is not about that stage, but at this point I wanted to give you a summary of the pages we will read. Like a spoiler. Like a clue. In the passage we read here, we see this and also, the prime influence, that is, the influence coming from the original principle, and this influence is two-sided. A side exists which belongs to the spirit that has connected to that atom. This is an influence that can be adapted both to the spirit and to matter, and allows their indirect interaction.
So, we see here that, the spirit that was only passing from one matter to another in the initial stage, now it gets experienced enough to connect to one atom. And from that moment on, as the atom gets developed more and more, the spirit, even at first in a passive, mechanical and automatic manner, it begins to get evolved until it builds up a being from the high energies the highly developed atoms emit. And from that moment on, the spirit will be connected to this being as this being begins to build bodies, starting from the plants to animals and eventually to humans. And as you said, here we see that, these opposite components in a duality unit bring out the motion. How? Through value differentiation between these opposites or polarities. When a value gets different in one PF the opposites, a flux begins to restore the equilibrium in this duality unit, like a shift in values. Well, of course, we will read more details about this mechanism as we continue reading the pages. And this sentence is so nice. There is no such thing either as length, shortness, arduousness or easiness in the divine order. All those adjectives we use to describe things or ideas are only because of the narrow scope of the duality in this hydrogen realm we live in. All the words we speak, all the thoughts we think are bound by this narrow gap of our perceptions. As you said, to this stage, the automatic process is added.
And imagine, in such a stage, becoming automatic is a great developmentary advancement, it only gets added as a result of a great development. And please do not confuse this automatism with the automatism we observe in the plants and animals. This is the stage when the spirit begins to observe how the passive mechanical process works automatically. And the book says, spirits automatically do preparations of initial instincts belonging to the states of relations between matter in the face of the causality principle. So, the spirit begins learning the laws of determination, and this learning is derived from this automatism, and as the spirit learns, it becomes able to understand these laws. Right now, in this stage, spirit has no power and knowledge, neither the will nor the aim for utilizing these laws. Spirit is still only passive.
All right, we still have 15 minutes. Let's continue reading. The hydrogen atom, even though it is the simplest matter of our cosmos, carries more or less a vast amount of energy, because it has acquired many influences and values before reaching this stage, starting from the initial amorphous matter state of universe. Let us remind you once again that the hydrogen atom we talk about here is not the hydrogen H, known by chemistry. The hydrogen atom we talk about is a matter combination which is the primary atom of our cosmos that includes all solar systems, stars, nebulae known by mankind through telescopes, in short, all astronomical bodies, and the hydrogen atom known by chemists is one of the very advanced and developed states of this hydrogen atom we mentioned as the initial matter of our cosmos. As it is in all matter in our cosmos, for the hydrogen atom as well, sustaining its state and its presence and continuously making progress is only possible by the equilibrium sums of the many matter parts hidden within each other in accordance with the duality principle and value differentiation mechanism, and these equilibria are governed by the original influences. Yes, here, the book expresses the states we discussed or mentioned this evening.
The book says, beware, we are still not talking about the hydrogen atom stage you humans know. The hydrogen atom we talk about is a matter combination which is the primary atom of our cosmos that includes all solar systems, stars, nebulae known by mankind. So please watch and study our videos, or Google the particle physics, search the Higgs boson, Higgs field. The concept of fields are also very important, it is very important in spiritualism, as well. Do your own search. If you are interested in spiritualism, you need to be a researcher, even a scientist. You may ask, in which discipline? Well, the discipline of the yourself. And it requires first to understand matter. So, please do your own research. We can only give you clues, encouragement, motivation. But the real work is up to you. Today, one of my close friends said to me, "I play your videos but after 30 minutes I get sleepy." Later I replay that video from start but again, within 30 minutes I sleep while listening. And I said to him, next time do not start from the minute 1 but continue watching from minute 31. I mean, we need to be persistent and diligent at such topics. Actually, we have all the mechanisms to keep ourselves awake, yet our bodies are so cozy in our habits, in our comfort zone that when too much light gets in, it turns off the switchboard. So, we need to turn on the switches. In Gurdjieff's teachings, you can read about energy accumulators. And indeed, you can observe the moments when you suddenly wake up during the night and you cannot go back to sleep. Well, it means the switches are turned on. That's why we repeatedly suggest you to go to the first video of this series and start watching all videos in this series. Also, let's say you search Higgs boson, you can read the articles and watch the videos listed in the search results one by one. Doing this widens your perspective.
The next passage is a little bit long. If you agree, we stop reading and maybe you can reply to this question from Mr. Tossin. It seems related to the topics we discussed this evening. Matter makes up 4% of the astronomical universe. Is the matter described in the book the beginning of the astronomical cosmos, or as known today, the Big Bang? You already explained, but...
Well, it is apparent that we need to set aside this Big Bang. First, there are many Big Bangs happening in many points in the greater space or in the astronomical space at the same time. Previously, it was not known, but now we know this. Such Big Bangs are discovered recently. Secondly, that 4% is the visible part of the hydrogen realm, which are composed of the variations of the hydrogen atom. And the remaining 96% is called dark matter or dark energy. This is not because they are evil. Because we cannot measure this 96%. Yes, this dark part has a strong influence, but I cannot say what this dark matter is. But certainly, I can say that it is not amorphous matter. It does not exist for us. If you discover a matter and call it amorphous, you are mistaken, because it is matter, it is in motion, it has vibration, then it cannot be amorphous. Well, maybe this dark matter is that disarrayed matter which we read and discussed this evening, but still I cannot say certainly. And I don't have this kind of knowledge. Yet when I study the clues in the book, this subhydrogen stage can overlap with the Higgs field and Higgs boson and particle physics. And the reason that 96% of matter is dark for us is that our measurement tools or gadgets use the molecules of the hydrogen atom. Similarly, the reason for our inability in detecting other sentient systems can be this, as well. So, please leave this Big Bang theory behind of us. In this book, there is no mention about the creation or the beginning of this universe. By reading this book, we cannot know about the beginning. Nothing is written about it in this book. The divine order and the universe only explains how matter begins this cycle.
Yes, the book takes the amorphous matter as its starting point, but it does not explain how the amorphous matter came into existence. It exists already. What this book explains in detail is how motion begins in matter. Well, this evening, our friends chat among themselves, they forget about us.
No problem, they can watch this recording later.
Yes, dear Bilgehan, next week, your brother Tumerhan will join me as the commentator. So, now let me thank you for your help, contribution and presence in this series.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope that what I could express and share was useful for our friends.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.